Imagine a single human being who, from a clearly defined moment onward, cannot forget anything, meaning that every perceptual detail, every spoken sentence, every written word, every internal thought that crosses awareness is retained with perfect fidelity and indefinite duration, while still being bound by ordinary human biology in every other respect, including attention limits, fatigue, emotional responses, and the physical time required to think, speak, and act, with no shortcuts such as instant recall of irrelevant memories or supernatural insight into things never perceived. At first, this looks like a personal condition rather than a societal one, because one person with total recall is still only one person, and the world already contains vast archives that technically remember more than any individual ever could, but the difference emerges immediately in how memory is used rather than how much exists. Since this person does not merely store information but carries it into every future decision without loss, distortion, or emotional fading, early life would be dominated by the novelty of the condition, as minor social interactions accumulate with unexpected weight, because embarrassment, praise, insults, and casual cruelty never soften over time, which would likely push the person toward either extreme withdrawal or extreme self-discipline, as ordinary psychological coping strategies rely heavily on forgetting, reframing, or blurring. Productivity would initially spike in narrow domains where repeated exposure matters, such as technical training or language learning, but soon plateau, because perfect memory does not eliminate the need to choose what to focus on, and attention becomes the bottleneck, not storage. Institutions would take interest only once reliability is demonstrated over time, because governments and corporations are structurally skeptical of anomalies, and a claim of perfect memory is indistinguishable from confidence until verified repeatedly under controlled conditions, after which the person would be treated less like a genius and more like an instrument, valuable not for creativity but for verification. Legal systems would cautiously test whether testimony from someone who cannot forget is more accurate or merely more detailed, and would discover that memory without interpretation is still subject to bias, framing, and emotional salience, meaning the person remembers everything but still does not know what everything means, which limits their usefulness as a human recording device. Economically, the person would not collapse markets or invent instant efficiencies, because organizations already optimize memory through redundancy and documentation, but they would become a highly paid specialist in audits, negotiations, and historical consistency, quietly correcting errors that emerge from institutional amnesia, such as policies justified by forgotten assumptions or contracts interpreted without full context. Over time, social norms around them would subtly shift, as people become more careful in speech when they know nothing will be forgotten, not because they fear exposure, but because they intuitively rely on forgetting as social lubrication, and its absence creates a mild but persistent tension that cannot be resolved without distance. Psychologically, the long-term cost becomes clearer as the person ages, because memory accumulation is not neutral, grief does not dull, anger does not cool, and joy does not blur into nostalgia, resulting in an internal landscape where the past remains fully present, forcing the mind to continually renegotiate relevance without the help of decay, which is exhausting in a way that sleep does not fully reset. Healthcare systems would eventually recognize this as a unique cognitive condition requiring new therapeutic approaches, not to erase memories but to manage their emotional activation, leading to treatments that resemble load balancing rather than healing, as nothing is ever truly processed and put away. Governments would consider security implications, briefly entertain the idea of classification or containment, and then abandon it as impractical, since a person who remembers everything but can only be in one place at a time is less dangerous than systems that forget selectively at scale, which history shows to be far more destabilizing. As decades pass, the person's value shifts again, not upward but inward, because the greatest impact is no longer external contribution but internal strain. As relationships accumulate unresolved detail, personal identity becomes rigid due to the impossibility of self-forgetting, and adaptability declines despite flawless recall. Eventually, society treats the condition as a cautionary boundary rather than an aspiration, quietly reinforcing the idea that forgetting is not a flaw but a function, and that progress depends less on perfect memory than on the ability to let most things go, leaving the inevitable conclusion that a world which truly remembered everything would not move forward at all.